Good evening, Brian, and thank you so much for joining me on the Sami Parvez show, sir. It is a great pleasure to have you back after a long time. I have been dreaming again.
Hi, Sami. I'm glad to be back. Busy times, very interesting election we're having. So,
Mhm.
lot to discuss.
Yeah, yeah. I was just speaking with David Craig, and he said it could be the most important election since I believe 1958. So it means it is a very critical time. Like we have been with liberals for 10 years, and everything is in crisis. Still, what conservative leader call it? Canada is broken. I don't know, like how Canadian or liberal says it is not, but we see like it means the prices are going up. People are struggling to find a job. As I personally struggle for a year to find a job, and I have been dependent on a line of credit. So let's talk about the polls. Like they are completely changing suddenly, as what you said on X that you are a poll denier. So we should not see what polls are suggesting. We should focus what leaders are like campaigning on it. Like what their goals or ideas or announcement are for their future government. So where would you see them? Like how would you see, like comparing like before just uh January 6th, that things were not like this, what polls are saying today? Should we trust them?
Yeah, no, I think we absolutely need to trust these polls. When it was one or two polls showing like the liberals surging, we could be skeptical. But now we have a pretty wide consensus among the pollsters. They don't all agree on how big the lead is for the liberals, but there's no question that they're ahead and they're winning. They're winning in Atlantic, they're winning in Quebec, they're most likely winning in Ontario, and they're most likely at the very least tied or ahead in BC. So, and we know with the vote efficiency, it's, I want to say it's a complete reversal of, you know, January's, early January polling or early December. But that's not completely true, right? The conservative, they used to poll at like 40, 45. Now they're polling at like 36, 40 or in average. So they have lost, but they haven't lost that much. Really, the big change is the fact that the liberals have just rebounded. And it's mostly because the NDP, it doesn't exist anymore. Like it's really shocking. We get polls after polls of the NDP. Like just this morning, we got one where they're tied with the Bloc Québécois. Overall, not in Quebec, I mean overall. So, the NDP
Yeah.
across the country is getting as many votes as the Bloc in Quebec. So this is a completely different environment, new leader. So a lot of people who were not voting liberals because of Trudeau, well, now they're back with the liberals. So this is and obviously the Trump tariffs, the threat from Trump. This is just I've never seen this. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen such a change in such a short period of time.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'm going to ask you first question. So like conservative are not losing their lead, but liberals are gaining, right? Is because of like NDP is losing their supporter. Am I correct?
Mostly, yes. As I said, right, I think the conservative have lost about 5%, but
Hmm.
they were only polling at 45, like really in December, right? I
Yeah.
mean, otherwise they've been at 40, 41. So they're
Hmm.
pretty much where they were before. And in many, I would say, for instance, in Quebec, they're doing better than ever. Like they're polling easily at 25%, sometimes even higher. So
Hmm.
they're doing quite well. It's just I would say there are two places where they have dropped. It's Atlantic Canada, where I think they were above 40, and now we almost never see them. They're always at like 30, sometimes even below 30%. And Ontario, they've been losing a little bit. We got the new poll this morning from Campaign Research. That's the Nick Kovalis, right? Like internal pollster for the PC in Ontario. And
Hmm.
they have the conservative at 33%, which is that's literally 2019 level, right? That's Andrew Scheer level. That's
Hmm.
below Erin O'Toole. and that's below Stephen Harper in 2015. So
Yeah.
they're bleeding a little bit, but not that much. It's really the issue is really the MVP.
Hmm. But like NDP is losing, like they are not in single digit. Sometimes we see like they are 7 or 6. So is there any chance that, like so for that we absolutely should blame Jagmeet Singh, like he prop up this liberal government for last 3 years, maybe now it could be 4 years almost, and he supposed to, he said he tear the agreement, but still they kept letting the Trudeau government to remain in power. And but so is there any chance that NDP could boost? And is there any chance, like I think like Jagmeet Singh could lose his own seat, right?
Or Jack Meeting
At this time.
is almost surely losing his seat. I think by now, most of the projections, including mine, he's not even second, he's third, he's not even close.
Wow.
That would require, for the NDP to save the furniture at this point, it would require an incredibly strong vote efficiency, like a little bit what we saw in Ontario, what, 2 months ago, where the NDP dropped to 18%,
Yeah.
the Ontario NDP. But they managed, especially in the seats they had, they were stable or they went up. So I live in Kingsway, so I'm in a very NDP riding in Vancouver, and polls projections indicate that the NDP is about to be, really badly beaten in my riding, but there is still no liberal candidates. They still haven't announced one. Everywhere you see orange signs because Don Davies has been organized. So, I wouldn't be too surprised to see a couple of those seats to remain. But Jack Meeting himself, most likely not. And yeah, the NDP, ultimately, the voters are just like, well, you supported the Liberals and they have a new leader. So we want to, and we've seen it again. There was an Angus Reid poll today showing that most of the NDP voters switching to the Liberals do so because they're afraid of Donald Trump,
Hmm.
right? So they decide to unite and to be, quote unquote, Canada strong with
Yeah.
Carney. And I don't have much hope for them because I think they're not even part of the conversation anymore. Like literally, I never hear about them in the media. Obviously, X isn't the best place for them, but they just don't exist. So the best we can hope, well, if you're conservative, the best you can hope is they remain strong in the few seats they have, like Vancouver East, Kingsway, Victoria, one or two in Ontario. And at least, they keep like 12, 15 seats. And those seats would be going to the Liberals otherwise. But it's a resurgence, like the party going back to even 15%, like Canada wide. I just don't see it.
Hmm. And what was the main reason that the lead of the conservative dropped? Is it because of just tariffs, or was there something else? We know like NDP, it mean losing their numbers, but what was the main reason that conservative dropped since like Carney became the leader of Liberal Party?
I think the two reasons, yeah, the main one for the conservative losing some voters to the liberals is really the fact that Trudeau is gone
Hmm.
and Mark Carney is there. And for a lot of people, Mark Carney, well, they like him more. They think he's qualified, competent. He's an economist, former central banker. Uh, when you're about to have an economic crisis and a trade war, at least on paper, he looks very good. So he definitely have some voters that were with Poiliev who now are like, no, no, I prefer Markan. And I think these voters were never really with Poiliev because they loved him. They just really, really hated Justin Trudeau. And Trudeau is gone, so you can go back to voting for whoever you want. There is also a little bit of the tariffs and the general threats of the US. It's not as important for the conservative, but you do have a couple of people who most likely think that Poiliev hasn't been strong enough. And obviously it's a subjective topic, but I think if you look over the last few months, if you compare Doug Ford to Pierre Poilievre, I do think Doug Ford has at least managed to give the image of
Hmm.
being more Team Canada and really, like screw the US and screw Donald Trump. When Poilievre has been, it's not like what he said is wrong. I cannot really, identify any speech he gave where I was like, oh, that was a mistake, or you too much like Trump. But it's a perception thing, right? And we see it in this first week of the campaign. I honestly thought the conservative would go really, really hard the first week into a very nationalist agenda, and you
Mm,
just talk about Canada, the tariffs, and all this stuff. And that's not what they've done. I mean, almost every day they're focusing more on like tax cuts, right? It's like,
mm,
oh, we're gonna cut your income tax, we're gonna cut the carbon tax completely. Today it's the TFSA top up for Canadians. So they try to tie to Canadian national identity, but they're not doing an amazing job. And unfortunately for them, they absolutely need to do an amazing job if they want to have a home. They would have to be like much better than Carney on this topic. And I don't think they are right now. If they are, it's just a little bit.
yep. But it seems like, as you are saying, like people are right now more concerned about the tariffs than whatever you are offering, what conservative is offering. Like they are not concerned about that thing. And like, don't you think that liberals are making every issue as a wage issue? What we saw back in 2021 election, like COVID was the biggest issue, though before the when the polls started at the first second week conservative were ahead, they could form a minority, but suddenly the breakout went further, the things got changed. Isn't it the same thing happening right now with respect to tariffs?
Yes, yes, absolutely. They've seized the moment. They realize the voters they can get, in particular the over 50, over 55 crowd, and
Mm.
their messaging has been really good with them. I mean, I'm thinking of
Yep.
like the Mike Myers ad where, I don't like it myself, but I'm not the target demographic for this ad. So definitely wage issue. And, let's give credit, the liberals are willing to just throw themselves under the bus to win votes. I'm thinking of like they removed the carbon tax, right? They spent the last 6, 7 years calling
Hmm.
anybody who against the tax a climate change denier. And now they remove it and they're literally bragging about this. They're putting ads out there like we care about the climate, so we remove the carbon tax. And like, what are you doing? I mean, and everybody's cheering. So the liberals have this really, really unique ability to just completely flip, and their base is just very happy to do so. The same people who were cheering for the carbon tax are now cheering to remove the carbon tax. So that makes things easier for them, right? So the carbon tax, capital gain inclusion
Yep.
tax, there has been a general shift in tone as well, right? I mean, Mark Carney doesn't sound like Justin Trudeau. He didn't go with a gender neutral or parity the cabinet, so essentially they've read the room and they're like, okay, if we need to do this, we're gonna do this. And I'm fascinated by the fact that this party can just completely change from left to right very
Mm.
quickly when they change leader, and the base is just okay with this because what they care really, really the most about is winning. That's what they care more about, and they're really good at winning. That's the conservative would not be able to do this because the conservative base is more ideological, and if you go away from your principles like even a tiny bit, then they're like, oh, then we create our own party or we're not gonna vote. So
Hmm.
that's good for the liberals, that's unfair to the conservative, but it is what it is.
Hmm. Yeah, and is there any chances for the conservative to recover, and what should they do?
If there is a chance, it will have to come soon. Like I know a lot of people online, the people I would call terminally online will tell you all the debates is where probably will win, but I'm not so sure. Debates usually don't matter that much. And by then it might be too late, honestly. April 16, April 17. If something has to change, it has to change. Like I would say, I was hoping this week, but next week. We need to start seeing some better numbers. So they need to stop campaigning. The feeling I get, I might be wrong, but the feeling I'm getting right now is they're doing the campaign they had planned to do uh, even before, like 3 months ago. So they had planned for a carbon tax election against Trudeau, and they're just executing this election, this campaign, but it's not working. So I would want to see a pretty big pivot uh, about different messaging. I'm going tonight to like the Poilievre event in Surrey. I'm literally going mostly to see have they changed? Have they changed what they're talking about? Have they changed how they're talking about things? And I guess we're gonna see, but it's grim right now. I mean, the idea it would require a pretty massive shift of public opinion in 3 weeks, and I just don't see it happening. I think at this point, maybe make it so the conservative, yeah, can they recover? As I said, it will have to happen fast. I mean, I think today, I think we're starting to see signs that maybe a shakeup will happen. Like we just got like news that the Doug Ford campaign manager, right? I mean, went on a podcast or in a conversation there. So she said, the private campaign they're not on the ballot box question. Like they're not doing the right campaign. Uh, I wouldn't be I don't know. I don't know if it's too late for them to do a shakeup of the campaign this late. They've been doing so well for 2 years. They raised so much money. They focus group every single details. And all of a sudden everything has changed. Uh, the other thing again, and for the conservative, essentially they need the NDP to get slightly better. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
NDP cannot be at 6% because in this country, if you get a united left versus a united right, well, guess what? The left will win most of the time because Canada is mostly a left-wing liberal country. So, we could end up with a crazy scenario where Poilievre will get more votes than Stephen Harper and any other conservative leader since Brian Mulroney, and he will still lose worse than any other leader so far, just simply because the liberals might be at 45%, which is, it's pretty crazy. Like 2 years ago, if you had told anybody, oh, Poilievre is at 41% in a Main Street poll, people would have been super excited on the right. But now they're at 41%, but the liberals at 45. So it's so weird. And as I said, I don't know if there is much they can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what are the chances for the PPC, People's Party? Is there anything they could win couple of seats or they make an impact? And would they like their like performance would cause to conservative, like they may steal some votes from the
Yeah.
conservative? Is this going to happen in this election, do you think?
So winning seats, I don't think there's any chance. Obviously the closest might still be Maxime Bernier is back in both, right? I believe. Uh, but his chances and the Conservatives are doing quite well in Quebec, so I cannot imagine that this is his day. And anywhere else, I just don't see it. I mean, they've lost, they've lost their main issue like COVID. They've pivoted, pretty smartly on immigration, but even there, I feel, both the conservative and liberals have also openly talked about reducing immigration numbers, not as much as the PPC, but for a lot of people, that's enough at least to see a change in the messaging. So they don't have much going for them right now, unfortunately for them. Um, they can, however, for the second part of your question was about essentially vote splitting.
Mhm.
Right now, the PPC is polling at 2-3% in average. So that's they were at 5 last time. Um, that's they're not costing the conservative many seats, but I think last time I looked, they were costing them still about 6 to 8 seats. So that's a lot less than the 20 seats they cost in 2021. I mean, if we give all their votes to the conservative. So I think at this point it doesn't matter because right now the liberals are winning so big that whether the conservative win 118 or 125 seats, that's it makes zero difference. If it were to get closer, maybe they would have a bigger influence.
Mhm.
So we will see. We will see. Also, it could be interesting to see if Poilievre does a pivot and really goes even more anti-Trump against America and all these things. And then there might be a small opening for the PPC. Not that the PPC is pro-America,
Mhm.
tariffs or anything, but there is a little, affinity, right? You have a minority of Canadians who wouldn't mind being the 51st states. You have a minority of Canadians who think that it's our fault for having tariffs. And so those guys are mostly with the, well, conservative and PPC, but they could leave the conservative if they think Poilievre is going too hard against Trump.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, like, well, Maxime Bernier could qualify for the leadership, like this lead this
The debate.
debate, leaders debate?
Okay, so I haven't looked at there must be a cutoff date, right? Because they changed the rules. This is pretty scandalous to me. I mean, and I've been very public about this. I think this is pretty gross what the debate commission did. They had rules to be eligible in 2021, and if we were to use the same rules, the PPC would be qualified this year. And so they went to change the rules just
Mm.
to disqualify the PPC, which to
Wow.
me, because in 2021 they said, well, you invalid if you have a party with a seat, if you got 4% last election, or if you're polling at more than 4%. And so
Hmm.
the PPC got 4.9, so they would be qualified this year, but they changed. They said, no, now it's back to you need to have at least a seat, you need to poll at 4%, and they're not, the PPC, not in average. Or I think there was another requirement, but following the rule of the.
90% of like you are like you have the candidates.
Oh, yes, you're right. So the problem for the PPC is we would need to start seeing a lot of polls like right now with them at 4% or more. And because it depends how you do the average. I remember in 2021, it came close for them to qualify. At some point, it really became, I think the average had them at like 3.8%.
Hmm.
And that was very short of the four. And it was really just a question of like one extra Main Street poll versus one extra Ipsos poll because they were doing better at Main Street. And obviously, right after the cutoff date, the PPC started polling at like 10%, right? So they would have qualified if the cutoff was a week later. So I don't know when the cutoff date is this year, but they need to start polling high now if they want to be invited. And I think it's unlikely at this point, which again is unfortunate. I think it should be on the debate stage.
Hmm. Yeah, it's but like this leaders debate commission, is it a like is it a independent body? Are they being appointed by government, or this is just separate thing completely? How it
Well,
works?
they pretend it's independent. I think ultimately, don't remember how they. I know it's not Elections Canada. My preference would be I think Elections Canada should be in charge of the
Mm.
two official debates. I mean, I think that would solve a lot of issues. Uh, it's semi-independent, I would say. The people who have been put on this, and I guess it's an improvement over what we had before. As when we had nothing, it was really just the media organizing with
Mhm.
the parties.
Yeah.
Uh, with that being said, again, I think the main issue really is why did you change the rules? They haven't convinced me that the rule of getting 4% was not the correct one. Why is it that we had different rules in 2021 and in 2025?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and I've said it before, even if you can make a strong argument that you shouldn't qualify with only 4% of the vote last time, the fact that they made this change this year and it really only disqualified one party,
Hmm.
uh, it's pretty gross, and they should have thought better about it. Like it looks bad, right? I mean, even if they're, let's be generous here. Even if they're truly independent and they genuinely believe the new rules are better, they should have thought about the optic of this.
Yep.
And I think in democracy and these type of things, the 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 optic matters quite a lot, and they made a mistake there.
Hmm. Yeah. And so what do you see like for the PPC leader, like where they would go if they don't perform well? Like is should like Maxime Bernier resign and another person take the lead, or it would be over for the PPC after this election?
Yeah, the way this party has been run, I think if Maxime Bernier leaves, the party just disappears. I mean, really, and the party is already not doing great. Like, but they are 2, 3, 4% right in the poll, so they're not at zero. They have their candidates. They were very organized in getting their nominating their candidates. I think if what we're gonna see, it really depends of does Bernier want to continue? If he doesn't want to continue and he's done and he wants to go to private sector or something else, then I think the party dies. He might be tempted to stay, however, because if the Conservatives lose this election and if they lose as badly as what we see in the polls right now, I genuinely believe there will be a push to split the party because the Conservative Party exists as a united front on the right, and it's a lot of people who don't like each other, right? You have the
Mhm.
social conservative, you have the libertarian, you have the monarchist, but essentially what technically unites them is the fact that they can win elections against the liberals. But if they lose this year again, this is four in a row. So at some point you're like, are we even winning elections? So I wouldn't be too surprised to see kind of a split, and there might be an opening for the PPC to be one of those
Hmm.
right-wing parties in the future. So, but I really think at the end of the day, it's a it's up to Maxime Bernier.
Hmm. Yeah. And where do you see like NDP would stand? Is like NDP like leader Jagmeet Singh could resign after losing
Yeah,
this election, like he may lose his own seat.
yeah.
But will there be any comeback for the NDP what we had back in 2011? Should we expect someone like Jake Layton, I think the leader was, who
They're
was
not
like
gonna
in
get. Yeah, no. I mean, yeah, Jack Meeting, of course, is resigning on election night. I think honestly, he will be almost happy to do so. He got his pension and everything. Uh,
Mhm,
I feel the NDP will most likely go back to being a very, very left-wing party, openly, like, like borderline or communist. And so they're not going to want to go with uh, like a moderate or anybody like this, at least not in the short term. Their base will be upset at what happened. And I'm not sure who will be the best candidate, but I'm not expecting them to get a very strong leader after this, but there will be somebody. I'm not afraid that the party will not survive. They will be able to survive. They have a history. They have enough people, and they had militants to keep it alive. Uh, but whether they can become relevant again in the future, that's difficult. I mean, if Carney really goes and governs more like in the center, borderline center right, depending on which days is campaigning, it should leave an opening for the a natural true left wing party in Canada. I think at this point though, if I'm them, I'm merging with the Green. I
mhm.
mean, they should not be two different parties. By now, they're the same party. They're the super environmentalist, they're super woke, they're anti corporations and whatnot. So just merge into, the left, a party called the left, like, think of like in Germany, like Die Linke. And you never really gain power, but you make noise during elections.
Okay. Okay, and like let as you brought in like green, like green. It seems like they performed very well in 2019 as compared to 2021.
Yeah.
Then now, so like, is it because like now the cost of living, like the main issue for the everyone, and before it was just climate change, global warming. It seems like that is now people don't care much about it. Is it because of that? And will any time like this election green would suffer more than, because I was seeing from 338 canada.com, like they were suggesting the Elizabeth May seat is like toss up, so it
Yeah.
seems like she's going to lose her own seat. So how do you see the green performance?
Yeah, no, I mean, 2019 they did well. They could have done even better, right? For a while, they were polling ahead of the NDP, but they lost this election, this campaign to Jagmeet Singh. So Singh did one good election in 2019. Uh, 2019 was also like there was a mini green wave around the world, right? They were
Yep,
doing very well in most of Western Europe, in
yep.
Austria. So there was, that was the peak of the climate change like concerns. And then, yeah, COVID happened, inflation happened, cost of living. And so I think what we learn is, yeah, people care about the environment, but not as much as they care about being able to put food on their table.
Hmm.
Uh, the Green are not helping themselves, right? I mean, instead of really being like a normal, principled party, every time I think of the Green now, I don't even think of climate change. I think of like woke stuff about
Hmm.
or Palestine. I mean, honestly,
Yep.
I think they make more noise about Israel and Palestine than they make about climate change. So even Green voters just don't go with them anymore. So this is kind of weird to me. And so now they have a couple of, I'm thinking of the provincial level, for instance, at the Ontario Green, Mike Schreiner, I
Yep.
think is very, very good.
Hmm.
And if they could maybe convince him to become the leader of the federal party and you merge with the NDP, and then you would have a strong voice out there. But otherwise, I mean, they've been lost for a few years. they elected Anami Paul. Remember when they had this leadership race, was it in 2020, 2021? And most of the race was about anti-Semitism. Like it
Mhm.
was like they had an actual anti-Semitic candidate that was accusing Anami Paul and whatnot. And I'm like, you're not a serious party.
Yeah.
And we've seen Greens doing bad everywhere, right, in recent years. Ontario, even with Mike Schreiner and a good organization, they did very, very badly. In BC, they kept their two seats, but they declined to what, like 10%, right? So
Mm.
pretty far from the 18 they used to be at.
Yeah.
So it's not a good time for
Mhm. Yeah. So like as you said, like Green and NDP needs to come, like they need to merge, but they both need a new leader. Like to think about like merging, like what we saw, like conservative before them, like there were two conservative party. I think one was progressive conservative and one another, but they merged in 2020, no 2003. But
them.
so do you think something would happen like that near future after these both leaders maybe will be gone?
Yes, I think it's possible. I think it will depend a lot on how badly they lose, uh, and whether there's going to be huge pressure on Poilievre to step down. But at the very least, there will be some discussions about like Alberta. They might be thinking that at this point they're better off just doing a block Alberta, or you do regional parties. I mean, my personal crazy idea would be to almost have like three parties that compete against each other, that don't
Mm,
compete. So I think they should revive like the old PC party, and
mm,
the new PC would run in Atlantic Canada, Ontario, maybe urban BC, and then there would be a new reform party that would be rural BC, Alberta, Manitoba. And I think they should have a Quebec one. I honestly think there should just be a Quebec Conservative Party, like essentially a Bloc Québécois, but right wing, and they
mm.
just compete. And then you don't compete against each other, right? Instead of merging, you
Yeah.
just, or the new reform just runs, I don't know, 150 candidates. The new PC runs 115 different ridings. And you just try to go win as many seats, and once the parliament is elected, maybe you do a coalition or you make a deal. But I'm wondering if that wouldn't work better than this United Conservative, which is, well, on one hand, it's working, right? I mean, they're at 40%, so they're not doing that badly, but uh, it's it's not working well enough for them to win elections. So what's the point?
Hmm. Yeah, and like if like conservative would lose, so Pyri Puliar would be called out to a step down, or he is going to stay like eh, like just stay for the next election. How do you see? Like we know, like they kicked out Andrew Shear,
Yeah.
then Erno Tool, and now it comes to Pierre Puliar.
My feeling, unless he really gets like wiped out, like, and I'm talking like losing his own seat. So I'm talking like what we saw yesterday in the Ecos poll, where they would win fewer than 100 seats. But if they essentially keep 115, 120, I think people will realize that the environment was bad for them. There will be calls, maybe not for Poilievre to step down, but a major shakeup of his team, like his campaign manager and other people that, to open this to other people. Uh, the only reason I think there might not be strong calls to get rid of him is still by far the most popular leader on the right. I think the only guy who could really replace him, like, and he would have a chance, is if somehow Doug Ford
Mm,
tomorrow said, "Well, I want to be the leader of the Conservative Party," but he's not going to say this after the election because he would rather be Premier of Ontario than opposition leader for the next 4 years, right?
mhm,
But so that's the only guy I can really see out there that would have the power, and then maybe some in the party would like, well, if we can get Doug Ford, we should get Doug Ford. But if nobody else, who do they have? I mean, Peter MacKay has been retired for 10 years. He tried to come back, it didn't work. Joshua tried to come back. That was a disaster. Christy Clark is a liberal. Jason Kenney, I mean, Jason Kenney has been, trying to come back, and he's been pretty good on X. Like, but now that he's like himself. Uh, so my guess is in the short run, there wouldn't be that many calls. They would realize that look, they've tried to change leaders like three times, and it never works. They are so unlucky, right? I think they get the wrong leader at the wrong time.
Time.
Like Erin O'Toole would have done better in 2019. Andrew Shea or Pierre Poilievre would have done better in 2021. And I feel right now, Erin O'Toole might be doing better than Pierre Poilievre right now with the threat of the tariffs and everything. So it's actually they keep having the wrong leader at the wrong time. And they might just be thinking, what's the point? We might as well just keep the guy and maybe change his image and do more ads. Well, then let's try because there is no magic solutions out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but don't you have the feeling like what happened in the history, like back in 1984 when senior Trudeau resigned, John Turner,
Yeah,
I think he was the leader,
yeah,
and but then they these liberal got a boost in the polls, but in the election day, so they lost badly,
yeah,
so then it happened same in 1993, I believe,
yeah.
when
Kim Kimberly, yeah,
Kim Campbell, yeah, she became the leader of conservative. So in the polls, it says they are doing
yeah.
very well, but suddenly they change on on the election day. So don't you think the same thing happened in this election, or this time things are changed?
The reason I don't see it is I think if you look at other numbers, other metrics than just voting intentions, everything is actually going into it's favorable to counties, right? I mean, we're talking like when we ask people, who do you think is best on this issue? Carney wins like most of those questions, right? So especially
Mm,
the main questions about Trump, trade war and whatnot. So, and I don't see this changing. People will see him as he's an economist, central banker. He has the experience for this. He's the guy. Uh, I don't think Kim Campbell was being seen as more competent. At least not on every issue. Brian Mulroney was most likely seen. I haven't looked at the polling, but that's my feeling. Or the very least, he was able to win the election by showing himself as being the better leader. Uh, so the vibes, right, the general environment just really don't go for the conservative right now. So I don't see a collapse. And especially not with the NDP being so bad. If the NDP wasn't that bad, then we could maybe see a split. But it seems right now people have just decided that they're not going to vote NDP, and they're very happy with Carney. So it would take either a monumental mistake of Carney or really, really incredibly good campaigning of Pierre Poilievre out there, I think, to really switch the situation. But I don't see uh, any magical, going back to normal. I mean, we again, for instance, another metric like the satisfaction with government, right?
mm,
Abacus this morning showed that essentially
yeah.
back in January or December, it was like 70% of people were unhappy, like 20% were happy. It has
Mm-hmm.
completely flipped in
Yep.
just like a few weeks. And so people are, it seems it was really a lot of we hate Trudeau and he's gone. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't hate this government anymore. And we hate Trump and we prefer Carney. So those things are very difficult to go against, uh, especially in 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but can you please define like these pollsters? Like we have Ecos poll, which says that Pierre Poulier would lose his own seat. This is
Yes.
terrible polling. And then we have Angus, and then we have Abacus, and we have other pollsters. So, do you think some pollsters are biased, like they've been called like left leaning or liberal pollster? Do you see them like that, or they are just doing their job and
No.
like reach to people, like
Yeah,
different
yeah.
people suddenly, like how do you see it?
Yeah, I don't believe there is any pollster in Canada that is like openly, well, they're openly partisan, right? Like Frank Grave, Kudomagi, Nick Kovale, so themselves, but I don't think they're fudging the numbers. I do believe, you have what we would call house effects, like some pollsters, because of the questions, weighting, uh, s- methodology, they lean more one way or another, so they have a little bit of like a bias. For instance, Ecos, I think, has a small bias where
Mm,
they probably overestimate the liberals and underestimate the conservative, but other polls might be slightly the opposite. But overall, we see the same thing everywhere, right? Polara has a liberal +9, Angersfield has +8, Leger, which is like the best firm in the country, is at +5 or something like this. So even if you remove the crazy outlier, like the Ecos poll yesterday, that was like what 50 to 34, something like this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't believe this one. But at the same time, it's not that crazy. If the actual numbers are,
Yep.
let's say, 45-38, then they're essentially one standard deviation away from the real numbers. And so then, for every poll we get like Ecos, we're gonna get another one that will be 42-39. And so, but in average, polling average has worked well. The only hope really is we've got the Saskatchewan election, right?
Mhm.
Last year,
Yep.
where the polling error was, I think, the third biggest in Canadian history. Like that was on par with BC 2013 and Alberta 2012, where really like one party was underestimated by like 10 polls.
Wow.
So we've never had such a miss at the federal level. Uh, could it happen? If it does, then we should see some signs. Like maybe one pollster will show a very different situation, at least to give us like an indication of the possibility of an error. But right now there is too much consensus, and pollsters have been pretty good in this country.
Mhm. And should we expect that liberals could win a seat in Saskatchewan?
So, okay, so if I remember correctly, in Saskatchewan, there is one because on the new map, they will win for sure one in the north, like because the riding in the north has been cut.
Mm.
Essentially, what has been left is mostly indigenous population. And
Yep.
I think, Paul said if you look at the results in those areas in 2021, it's easily liberals, even in 2021. So I think they will win one. Now, the bigger question is, do they win one in Saskatoon or Regina?
Mhm.
It's not impossible. It really depends on the numbers. It's not the most likely right now, but it's not impossible like it was like you know, 3 years ago.
Mhm. And how do you see so let's talk about Mark Carney his own riding. They kicked out Chandra Arya. They accused him that he has ties with India before they kicked him out from the leadership campaign. Now they revoked his membership. So is Mark Carney going to win his own seat? What
Oh yeah,
does the poll
oh yeah,
says
for sure.
like?
Yeah, yeah. No question there. Easy win for him. Yeah, no, I have no question about this.
Hmm. And so, like we saw like in the Ontario election, the Doug Ford party. I mean, it did not perform over well, but they got what they had in before. Like everyone is the same numbers, but Liberals and NDP got a boost. Though I think NDP Liberal leader lost his own lost our
Yeah,
own
she did.
seat.
Yeah, yeah.
Like yeah, but they performed better than last time. But despite that, what we see, like we have conservative government in Ontario, but despite that, they cannot perform well in federal level. And we also see like there is no communication between Doug Ford and Pierre Pouliot as compared to like Daniel Smith or Scott Moore. They have better communication with Pierre Pouliot. So how do you see this thing? Is it impacting conservative performance in the polls?
Yeah, I think, obviously the PC party in Ontario has been very successful. I think if we dig through the numbers, I'm not convinced that, they're that much better. I mean, they're getting what? They got 43% of the vote, with a very low turnout. So
Yep.
they're doing a little bit better in the GTA and Toronto, but I think this is almost entirely, it's a dogfood effect, right? It's just light and it's from there. So it's difficult to replicate this with at the federal level. And they're facing much weaker opposition. Right? I mean, not only the opposition is divided, which isn't the case for Poilievre, right,
Mhm.
anymore, but the leaders that Dockford has been facing, they were not Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, right? Bonnie Crombie was
Yep.
pretty bad. Old Andrew Hogwarth for the NDP was okay, but last election she was still pretty bad. You could tell she was tired. Merit Style, I thought she was pretty useless this election.
Mhm.
So you have a couple of I think a lot of people or some people on the right think that, oh, you should just take whatever Dockford does and you put it at the federal level and we win. I'm not that convinced it would be that simple. People vote slightly differently. And if you were to do this, you might do slightly better in Ontario, but then I think you do much worse in the West. So, Doug Ford doesn't have to worry about winning Alberta and winning rural BC and Saskatchewan, right? He
Mm-hmm.
doesn't have members from there. Uh, yeah, I mean, they could learn from. I think the one thing they could really learn, and the one thing they should have been able to do in terms of communications with each other, is really capturing the fact that the vibes have shifted so much. And I don't think the Pro-Life campaign has noticed this. I think they're still delusional in thinking, oh, everything is fine, polls are wrong, and people are upset, and we're gonna win. But I think the dog for campaign has noticed right away, and they've said now very publicly, they say, look, it has changed completely. Like, was it Toby, what is Keneki? Like, I never know how to say his name. Uh, One of the campaign manager of Dog for, like a few weeks ago, he was on a podcast and he said they need to realize how much people are upset. Like, and he mentioned, he said, when Gretzky, a Canadian legend, if now Gretzky goes into an arena in Canada, he's gonna be booed. And I agreed with him. And I think this is the new reality. You have to campaign differently, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what they've done very very well. That's what the Polif campaign hasn't, and maybe because they don't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are right. But did like a conservative make a mistake in 2019 and 2021? Ask Doug Ford to stay away from campaign. Like back then, it mean Doug Ford was asked, like he said, he has his own, like lot of work. He's not going to interfere there. And this time is, I don't know, like Doug Ford said, or like news media outlet reported, cited sources, the Doug Ford said that he and his caucus member would be busy helping Ontarians rather than, like campaigning for Conservative Party.
Yeah, they don't want to be associated. That's funny. In 2019, it's the federal conservative who didn't want to be associated, right? Because Doug Ford was toxic in
Yeah.
2018, 2019, before COVID. But since then, it has flipped. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's Doug Ford. And my understanding, what my sources have told me is Doug Ford was very clear to all of his team and staffers and MPPs. They're like, you cannot go help them because I think they see them as toxic, like the federal conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it's fair, but at the same time, my understanding is the campaign manager or the campaign team of Poiliev, they hate the campaign team of Doug Ford.
Yep.
So, if you don't talk to each other, if you hate each other, you're not gonna help. But yeah, at this point, that this is not helping. I mean, for if Poiliev, he would need the help of Doug Ford, and I'm sure they ask, they try, but uh, if they don't want to, they don't want to. I don't know if they don't. I don't know if Ford doesn't want to help because he's worried about his own re-election 4 years from now,
Mm-hmm.
or if there is more. I mentioned it before. Does he want the job? Does Doug Ford think, well, I want to be the next prime minister of this country, so I need to replace Pierre Poilievre? If that's the case, I'm not gonna go help him now.
Mm-hmm. So, what's your prediction at this time on election day result?
So my prediction is the Liberals win a majority, and it's not even close. I think the 190 seats is very, very possible at this point. If anything, if there is uncertainty, I think it's more likely that the Liberals go above 200 than below 170 at this point. So it's but I've been very negative and pretty much like a doomer for a while. But everything has proven me right. I mean, I remember I went to an event in January or February in Vancouver downtown, and there were, when you go to events in political events in Vancouver, it's always the same 10 people on the conservatives there. And
Mm-hmm.
everybody there, but yeah, multiple people told me, dude, you need to stop being so negative. You need to stop dooming on Twitter and or X with, because that's what the polls were starting to be good for the liberals. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, but look, I'm looking at this and it's not looking good. And, I've been proven right. So right now, I don't think there is any chance we win this election as a conservative. I think at this point, keeping the liberals to a minority would already be a major victory.
Wow. Yeah, and is there anything you would like to share which I did not ask you or we did not discuss today?
No, I mean, I think and people who follow me know that I'm a big fan of proportional representation. I mean, the one thing that is really bumming me out with the result we're seeing there is we're even further away from proportional representation because we're now really going to end up with only two parties. And so when we only have
Mhm.
two parties, we don't get proportional representation. So it's I think it's the main negative for me. I was hoping that a Poilievre win with a divided left would maybe finally force the liberals to be for proportional representation, but now they will be even less for it because they're like, look, we just killed the NDP and we have it with us. So that's for me, that's going to be the main negative of this election. On top of, yeah, obviously, we have a government that has been doing incredibly badly on the economic front. Right, that's a literal lost decade. Right? We have no growth of GDP per capita in 10 years, and to see that people are just you just change leader, you put a new coat of paint on the
Mhm.
party, and people just go back to it. I mean, it's
Yep.
I'm becoming cynical with
Mhm.
democracy.
Yep. Okay, Mr. Brigut, thank you so much, sir, for joining me. It was a great discussion. It is always a pleasure. As I always say, it is always my dream that you must be here with me discussing. I always like maybe I don't say mocked you, but I just as funny I said maybe you need to do like as you always share about your student. I think you must do a online classes for your friend, as I'm one of your best friends, sir.
No, thank you, Sami. I appreciate your work. I mean, you're working very hard out there, and you've been pretty successful, I think. So very happy to be here.
Yeah.
And good luck, in covering the next like 3 weeks.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Yeah, I appreciate your support and the and motivation you gave me. Hopefully, looking forward to seeing you again, maybe next week. Just please
Okay.
keep it in mind. I may bother you again. Okay,
Okay.
okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
What time is
thank
it?
you.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect timing. I'm gonna
Yeah,
go make lunch. And so
yeah,
yeah, let's
yeah.
just keep in touch. Send me the link when it's uploaded, and obviously I'm gonna share on
Sure,
my.
sir. Thank you so much, sir. Once again, thank you. Bye,
Take care.
bye. Thank you.